Hello, I'm Greg Jackson, Pastor Greg Jackson, and I am rehearsing how to use Vimeo. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about the King James Version of the Bible and a very important person involved in changing everything, and that is Tischendorf. Here's a book I got today called Secrets of Mount Sinai. And it's an excellent book because, on the one hand, the author is just a hero worshiper of Tischendorf. And on the other hand, even though this is true, how much he likes Tischendorf, admires him, and so forth, has nothing but good things to say about him. It's also pretty factual. And so, what's fun and important about this is Tischendorf went to this monastery, and he has a story that in the library, there were a bunch of leaves with Greek writing on them. And they were sitting there in a basket, and they were going to be thrown into the fire. This story's been repeated over and over again by his own family. He stuck to it, makes no sense. I think I said this in the last talk. The fact is, those ancient codices were written on parchment skin. Do you think there's any type of skin, especially dried up for centuries, that we could toss onto a fire and warm up the room? Or will we even want to do that? We want to consume something so ancient to the flames? Would monks in a library want to do that? It makes people think that those first leaves that he had were stolen. That's part one. So even if you believe this is true, we've got a part two to the thievery. The part two is this. He really wanted to get that codex. That's a bound book. This would be, you might say, a codex, a bound book, and the leaves were sewn together. So when it was done, it was like this, but we have, I'm showing you something you can't see. It would look like this, not a scroll, but a book. So it would be sewn together. So why were those leaves separate? Did he cut them loose? Maybe. But part two is this. Part two is he wanted to get his hands on this so badly. So he said to the monastery, I'd like to take this and show it to the Tsar of Russia. He's Orthodox. You're Orthodox. We could maybe copy it and bring it back. I'm paraphrasing it, but it was not an honest deal. Once it left the monastery, they never saw it again. Tischendorf took it to the Tsar. The Tsar paid for it. And many years later, the communist regime wanted some cash, so they sold it to the British Museum. British Museum paid half, and the public paid half for this codex, which is called Sinaiticus, after Mount Sinai. Well, anyway, that was called Mount Sinai. People debate about that. And so they, in the process of doing this earlier, they turned the codex into printed pages. Now, that's an interesting thing that people don't think about. You say you have this giant 4-volume set of Codex Sinaiticus. Are they giving you photographs of the original? No. What they're doing is they're giving you typeset. And that means that every single letter is, in effect, an edit. So it's once removed from the original. So that's one question. Another question is, how old is Sinaiticus? Someone who was known as a forger said to the public, I did that. That's my codex. It's not old, it's new. And as I said before, two earlier witnesses said the skin was white and it was artificially aged later. That's what one expert thinks. So what we have is something that was handled by a dubious character. Wait, no, it's not dubious. We know exactly what he was. He was a self-promoter. He was a liar. He used duplicity to take those initial leaves out. However, he did that. And even more duplicity when he took the rest of them off to Russia. And what belonged to the monastery, he regarded as his own to bargain with. So he said to the Tsar or his agents, well, why don't we give them something? And they got some money and they got some medals and things like that. And Tischendorf, as this became known, became the great hero of all those people who wanted ancient manuscripts of the Bible. That was quite a trick. And he was next connected, well, actually earlier, and then finally connected to another codex called Vaticanus. And as you might guess, it was stored at the Vatican. They didn't much want him to see that. And at the end of his life, he started working on it a little bit, and then he died suddenly. That's what happened. But Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, parents without any children, became the two books that were considered the basis for the Greek New Testament. Now think about that. All these copies were made from the apostolic age up into through the Byzantine Empire. And the originals, of course, were worn out because they were copied and recopied until they wore out. First the parchment ones, then the papyrus or paper ones. And those majority texts, they agree with each other. But Vaticanus and Sinaiticus do not agree with each other. 40% difference. That's a big difference. So what do the modern biblical scholars say? They say they'll go with the dubious Sinaiticus and the questionable Vaticanus and skip all the majority texts. So what you have before you, when you have a ESV, NIV, New RSV, etc., is something that came from the work of one person who wasn't very honest and engaged in a lot of trickery to make himself famous. That's Tischendorf. After him, Hort and Westcott put together Greek New Testament on their own, and they made that the revision of the King James Version, the Greek part of the New Testament. And that's another story. We can only take so much of this Greek New Testament stuff, right? But there's a lot of skullduggery in it, and it's very interesting. So there will be more tapes about this in the future. Thanks.